G'day everybody and welcome back to the channel, and today we're doing something a little bit different. Now, I was scrolling through YouTube and I noticed something. No one has ever done a historical breakdown of gun camera footage of any kind at all. And while I'm known for making funny reaction videos to Call of Duty or naval history and the occasional piece of tank history, my actual area of quotation marks expertise is combat aviation and the history of military aviation. So, I thought, well, it's time to get in touch with my roots and delve into doing the first, as far as I know, breakdown of gun camera footage. And I thought we'd start with something interesting. As you can see by the title, we're going to start with Luftwaffe gun camera. And so, as you can see, it's got compilation there. I went through all of the Luftwaffe gun camera I could find and picked some of the most interesting clips I could to break them down and explain what's going on and sort of give you a bit of a historical background as to what's going on the screen. So, we're starting with what I think is a good place to start on, and that is the entry of the 8th Air Force into the war in Europe in the air. As you can see, we've got some B-17s on the screen here. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is because I want to tell you a quick story. When the 8th Air Force and the American heavy bombers came into World War II, it was a very big shock for everybody who encountered them. The Japanese and the Germans were dumbfounded by the B-17 and the B-24. They were used to fighting British and Soviet and other outmoded designs, which only had, say, 1 or 2 .303 caliber or 30 cal machine guns sticking out the back, maybe in a turret if you're lucky. And they were only operating in small formations of, say, 10 to 15 aircraft. Or operating at night, in the RAF's case. The only real hardcore bomber that the British had was the Vickers Wellington, and again, the defensive armament on that aircraft was not very extensive. Its real strength came in its durability and the lattice construction of the airframe, meaning it could take a lot of punishment but keep on flying. So when the B-17 and the B-24 arrived, an aircraft which has anywhere from 10 to 14 50 cal machine guns, durability up the ass, being made with rugged American components, especially in the B-17's case. And then they're flying in combat box formations of 50 to 100 aircraft. It was, needless to say, a little bit of a shock. So in response to this, the Luftwaffe sent a group of aces from the Eastern Front, transferred them to the Western Front, and got them workshopping, essentially, to find out a way to counter these aircraft. And eventually, after some trial and error, 2 very prominent aces, Egon Meyer and Georg Peter Eder, came up with the method of the front quarter head-on attack. So essentially, the way you would destroy an enemy bomber, especially in World War II, is that the enemy aircraft, if it's a bomber, will usually have a very large observation dome or a lightly armored front component, because that's where the bomb bay controls and the bombardier's location is going to be. That's where the bomb site's going to be. All right, and so you want to hit that to kill the bombardier and the pilots, who are the command and control system running the aircraft, because we don't have autopilot yet. So kill the pilots, plane goes down. Also, in the front quarter shot, you have a full plane view of the engines, and failing killing the pilot or the aircrew, knocking out the engines will of course mean the aircraft cannot continue its mission. So they developed the front quarter attack, where the squadron, or the Staffel, will form up into a head-on attack and blast through the formation, hitting bombers in the front. The reason they did this is twofold. One, is to be more effective on the kill, as we've just discussed. And 2, being in head-on, it minimizes the exposure to enemy fire, because the closure rate, when you're approaching from behind, is going to be your speed minus their speed. They're going away from you. And so you're only going to be approaching at, say, I don't know, 10 miles an hour towards the enemy plane, right? If you're going at head-on, it's their speed plus your speed, which means you are going to be approaching them at 300 miles an hour, say, or 250 miles an hour. They're going to be coming the other way at 250 miles an hour, which means your closure rate is 500 miles an hour. Meaning that the enemy gunners only have maybe a couple of seconds to swing their guns around and shoot at you, giving you the advantage and allowing you to put your guns on target, knock out the bomber, and then break away. And so, in the first few clips, we'll see them do just that. Now, as you can see, I've slowed this one down. He's approaching from the front quarter, firing his 20 mils and he's hitting the wings. He's aiming for the engines and for the main cockpit section and hits the inboard engine. Now with the B-17, I should point out that the primary fuel tanks for the B-17 are in the wing root, along with all of the control systems going to the ailerons and the other engine controls. So if you hit a B-17 in the wingtip, you'll see them shooting for the B-17's wing, like, not the wingtip, excuse me, inner wing, the wing root. You'll see them shooting for that, because if you can get a decent burst on that, you can mess up their whole day and maybe even start a critical fire, which will result in the loss of the aircraft. We'll go see the next one. Okay. Here he comes in, below and in front. Now, the earlier models of B-17 did not have chin turrets. And here you can see again, front quarter shot. Now, the below and the front attack was pretty good because the earlier models did not have chin turrets, which means that was a dead zone where only the ball turret gunner could hit you. So you can see that the closure speed is really high. And here we can see the same thing with B-24s. The closure speed is really, really high. And so the enemy gunners do not have enough time to bring their guns on target. And this one, he's coming from a high angle of attack. He's coming straight down in the dive and going after the wounded bird. Like, if they see a wounded aircraft or a small group of stragglers, they'll always try and pick them off. It's safer than going after the formation. And again, low front quarter. This is a bit more dangerous with the B-24, which I'll show you in a second. So we bring up, this is the footage I wanted to show you with this B-24. I'm going to freeze frame right about here. Alright. So as you can see with the B-24, it's a bit more dangerous because you have the ball turret and you have the nose turret here. And what's really interesting about this footage is you can see that the ball turret is trying to swing himself around because he was watching low 6, because low 6 is the common attack pattern for most aircraft. It's the traditional attack pattern to hit anything. You want to be below and behind a target. He's trying to swivel his gun around and face front to engage the aircraft making the head-on passes. But if you look really closely, I know the footage is a bit grainy, but you can see these bits here, how there's no, like, line sticking up. That these two things here, you can see it, that the two lines here designating the 50 cal orientation, those are directly in line with the pilot's point of view. So as this 109 or 190 is coming in for the forward attack, this nose gunner on this B-24 is engaging the aircraft we're currently seeing the engagement from. That nose gunner is engaging us, for metaphorically speaking. There you go. Now this footage is interesting. This in the next frame, and I'll show you why in just a second. This is a B-17 who's going down out of control. He's got a starboard wing fire. And this is the footage that's really incredible. This footage right here. You can see the amount of damage that's being done to this airframe. There's huge chunks flying off. And as I said before, the B-17 is a very sturdy aircraft. You also notice that there's two lines of tracer at intermittent intervals hitting the target, and yet they're doing incredible amounts of damage. Well, the reason why is this is actually very rare gun camera footage. I had to go digging for this. This is gun camera footage from an ME-163 rocket interceptor. So the reason why the closure rate's a bit slower, I've slowed down the film to make it more legible, but this ME-163 has used its rocket engine to gain altitude, park itself above the bombers, and then nose in and go into a high-speed glide onto the B-17. And he's shooting at the wing root. He's shooting at the control surfaces and the wing root, the starboard wing root, in order to bring down the aircraft. And in the post-analysis in the comments section of the video, who identified the gun cam and the pilot who scored the kill, this B-17 did go down. Now, this I'm including for a bit of a different perspective. So, as we've just seen, you're either in a rocket aircraft doing a high-speed dive on a B-17, or you're coming from a front quarter shot. Okay? Now, the ME-163 is really interesting because eventually, in those high-speed dives, they needed to bring in a little bit of automation to help the pilots out. So, if you know about German night fighters, they actually had vertical guns mounted in them, which allowed them to engage targets above them. So what night fighters would do is fly underneath bombers, usually Lancasters or Halifaxes from RAF Bomber Command, flying at night. They would park underneath them and then fire upwards into the bomb bay, destroying the bomber. Okay? However, when you've got the closure rate of a rocket plane, essentially, you're going too fast to manually control that. So what they eventually did with some ME-163s, not many, but what they did with some was fit them with the vertical firing system and then put a photosensitive cell in the wings. And what that would do is they would fly above the formation using their rocket motor, do a power glide, and then come up underneath the formation. And at high speed, they would fly inches underneath the B-17 going high speed in their glide. And the moment the shadow of the B-17 passed over the photosensitive cell, it would trigger the firing of the guns. And several B-17s were brought down using that system. They would fly underneath, the shadow would block out the sun, that would trigger the guns, and they would fire 30mm cannon shells into the belly of the B-17 at point-blank range, destroying the aircraft. And the reason why I've included this is these are actually Soviet bombers, specifically DB-3 Soviet bombers, an older type, and they only have one rear gun that's got the ability of firing directly backwards here, and one upper mid-turret around here. And as you can see, the difference in approach, realizing that they've only got like two really pathetic guns to worry about, and most of the time unexperienced, or inexperienced rather, Soviet crews. He just approaches the entire formation from dead six, flat and stable, picks his target, and knocks it down. So we'll see him make the approach here. This is most likely over Crimea somewhere, or the Black Sea, or maybe even over the Leningrad, but I don't see any terrain around him, so this is probably around Crimea. And you can see here, you can see he's moving the rudder right to left, and he's raking his cannon fire along the length of the aircraft. And he's also able to stay out of the gunner, so the upper mid gunner is here, and he's able to put the vertical stabilizer in between him and the gunner, and he has no chance. And he, of course, starts a fire on the wing route, and down he goes. This, of course, is something that most of you should recognize. This is a Hawker Hurricane. Not sure what model. I think we see a desert paint scheme in this one, but this is just your standard below and behind shot. So as you can see, the pilot is approaching from below and behind. He's in the pilot's blind spot. This guy has not seen him. He's flying straight and level, cruise speed. He's coming up from below and behind, doesn't have any idea what's about to hit him. And you can see this is an ambush attack because of the proximity of the aircraft. Eric Hartmann would do this quite often. This was his personal style, if you like. Eric Hartmann was famous for it, where they wouldn't dogfight, they wouldn't play around or do the fancy maneuvers like you would see Gerd Barkhorn or Hans-Joachim Marseille, plugging my next video. You wouldn't be doing the things that they're doing, like fancy maneuvers, incredible deflection shots. No, Eric Hartmann would do something very much like this. And of course, he's the most successful fighter pilot in the history of aerial warfare, so obviously it's the right move. You sneak up behind someone without them noticing, come up in their blind spot, get close, and you just fucking smash him. Right there. He hits the radiator and the intercooler. Also gets, I think he got a 20mm tracer into the engine. Smoke just pouring out of this thing. Looks like desert camo. That's sort of the darky brown, and that's the light sandy yellow, I'm pretty sure. It's black and white, but I'm guessing that's it. So I'm guessing this kill is on a Hurricane Mark II over North Africa. But yeah, this is a complete loss of the aircraft. And again, similar situation. Wings level, coming in from a rear quarter shot. Again, point blank range. Smashes him. Now this is interesting because it shows two Spitfires, and I've included this footage because it's air combat maneuvering footage. So the Spitfires are in formation, echelon right, and the 109 is coming up on this guy. And again, we see a Hurricane, same situation. Now, there's an interesting bit there which I want to go back and show you. So if you notice this Hurricane, he goes down into a dive. So you see that little cough of smoke that just came out? That pegs this as a Hurricane Mark I, or at least a Hurricane that does not have the Mrs. Schilling's orifice, as it was known. You see, the earlier model British fighters on the Merlin engine, most notably the Hurricane and the Spitfire, had a carburetor float engine, which means consequentially it used gravity to fill the float with fuel and then pump that fuel into the engine. If you pushed negative G-force, that is pushing the nose straight down. For those of you who are unfamiliar, if you've ever been on a roller coaster and that sinking feeling you feel when you go down the ramp, that's negative G. Okay? When you pushed over in negative G, the fuel in the float chamber would rush up and deprive the engine of fuel. Like, the engine would just not be receiving fuel. And so the engine would cut in the dive. And that black puff of smoke that you saw there is him pushing over into a negative G push down. He's pushing over into negative G, and the engine is cut, causing that puff of black smoke. It happens at the start of the Battle of Britain movie with the victory roll that the Hurricane does at the start, and it does the same thing. You can hear the engine cut, which I'll put that clip right here. Now this one's a bit interesting. I included this one because you don't normally see this aircraft in gun camera footage. Because if we get closer, you'll notice, yep, there we go. The distinctive shape, there it is. We are looking at a P-40, a Curtiss P-40 Warhawk or Kitty Hawk, depending on what you want to call it. This is most likely either Australian or South African, as it's definitely over North Africa. Because as you get close, it's got North African paint scheme and RAF roundels. And you can see that this pilot is getting really, really close. And you notice the single tracer, so this is most likely from around mid to late 1942 from a 109F series or an early G series. And he is attacking this guy and he's getting really close. You can see he's configured for speed too because his oil cooler and his radiator are closed up all the way. He's going at full chat. He's trying to get away, but he's just not fast enough to get away from this 109. Also, the P-40 is excellent in a dive, but as you can see, it's not exactly the most streamlined airframe. Pretty maneuverable too when it's got enough lift, but again, the 109 just outclasses it in every capacity, and as a result, yeah. Now, this is footage of Spitfires over North Africa. Now, I included this shot here because you can see him doing a split S, and this one's really cool because we get a perfect brake turn. Now, this Spitfire has seen the 109 engaging him, and he's creating an angle problem. So what he's doing is he's turning into the attack to increase the closure rate to give him less time to get a shot, but also to potentially force the overshoot. Because if this 109 that we're sitting in right now whizzes past him, he can roll right and reverse in on our tail. So what he's trying to do is he's trying to complicate the gun solution and then put himself back into a position for a shot. And also we get this beautiful, absolutely gorgeous plan form of a Spitfire Mark V. And you can see the gorgeous elliptical wings. Merlin engine going crazy, and you can tell it's a Mark V because you've got the blisters for the Hispano 20mm cannons, which are right here. And as you can see, by doing that maneuver, the Spitfire has escaped most of the damage and got away. This Hurricane, not so much. He's in trouble now. Yep. Basically smashed. And he got hit so hard, he's deployed the gear and it has set the gear alight. So the left gear leg is now on fire. I'd be leaving that aircraft as quickly as possible. And this, ladies and gentlemen, I don't need to tell you, is a war crime. That is an aircraft making an emergency landing in the desert, and this Luftwaffe pilot is strafing him while he's on landing. No comment. Now here we have combat over Europe versus the 8th Air Force, or perhaps the Air Forces operating over Italy, and we are engaging a Republic P-47 Thunderbolt. And it is a Razorback model of Thunderbolt. You can tell it's the earlier models. It doesn't have D-Day invasion stripes, and it's got the Razorback configuration of the fuselage. We're going to get really close here. Now you can see that the Thunderbolt has disappeared from the bottom of the screen. The reason he has is because, as you know, when you're engaged in a maneuvering fight, you have to get your guns in front of the direction of travel of the enemy aircraft to score the kill. Because you can't just point the nose guns at him and just pull the trigger. The rounds will go where he was. It won't go where he's going to be. Anyone who's got a basic understanding of shooting in video games and stuff knows the concept. And so, along with the bad exposure, he's out of frame. And eventually he's coming back in. And as you can see, the angle the angle of deflection decreases as he's pulling around onto this P-47's tail. And so what the P-47 is now trying to do is he's trying to move out of plane. So he realizes he can't outturn the 190 or the 109. He's just too heavy. He's not going to be able to outturn them. So what he's doing is he's trying to drop speed and force an overshoot, complicate the gun solution by turning into his attacker, and he's rolling down. He's pitching down to get more airspeed, and he's also trying to change the plane of movement to throw off his gunshot, which works out for him. The only problem is he's now up shit creek. Now this is really cool because you can see the wingtip vortices forming on the aircraft. He's pulling hard G now. This P-47 is turning as tight as he can. Not going to save him though. It's really hard. There he is. We're right up close now. We get a full plane view. The aircraft shuddering. Impacts. This P-47, it's GG for this guy. It's just a matter of time. And here he is. As you can see now, the 109 or the 190 has matched his plane of movement. And he's matching his turn. And he's getting in really close. He's closed the distance between them. It's formality now. Yep. Game over. Start seeing impacts on the aircraft. Now this is actually quite interesting because this is different footage, I believe. Give me a good view. Yeah. So we'll get a better view in a second. This is a different P-47, and you can see, and I chose this one to show the different time frames that we're in, because now you can see that we're post D-Day because those are invasion stripes on his wings. Now this is really cool footage. This is a dogfight between a Mustang, and I believe it's a Focke-Wulf 190 that we're in this dogfight. So he's behind the Mustang, and as you can see, in trying to match the turn with the Mustang, he's lost control of the aircraft, and he's tried to follow the pull of the Mustang, and the rapid jerking movement of the aircraft has caused a high-speed stall, or a snap stall, or a torque spin. If it's a 190, they're very susceptible at higher speeds and slower speeds to suddenly snapping around with the torque to the right. Snap stalls are very nasty in the 190, and as you can see, in trying to follow the Mustang through that maneuver, he's lost control of the aircraft, and he's trying to get it back. He's wrestling to get it back. He's obviously a very high altitude. You can see how high up he is. He's fighting to get control of the aircraft back. In this time, you'll see in a minute, the Mustang will have recovered and it's come back around. So the Mustang has seen him stall out and lose control, and the Mustang has come back at him, and the 190 or the 109 has pulled up to get back on guns on, and it goes into a head-on merge. And whack. And you can see here that he scores impacts on the aircraft as it goes by. Crazy stuff. Crazy footage. Now this is Luftwaffe footage. They are engaging P-38s who are strafing an airfield. Now the P-38 is a twin-engined long-range fighter. Very good over the Pacific, but due to its size, it had the same issue that the Bf-110 did. It did not have the maneuverability to keep up with the 109s and the 190s. That being said, if they had altitude, they could do some damage. Now this is what makes that footage interesting. I'll just cut it back for a second here. Our guy here is diving in on this P-38 at our 11 o'clock here. He's going in, he's firing his guns. Another P-38 is crossing right above them, and this is what's interesting. From right of frame, you just see it here. Here he comes. 109 just swings right in front of him and begins engaging this guy. He immediately breaks left to dodge the new threat, and now he has two 109s on him. Not a good day. Now this is interesting footage because I went scouring for this. This, from going forward from here, is Eastern Front footage, and we are engaging an LA-5. And again, you can see they're in a maneuvering fight. The LA is performing hard maneuvers, but he can't get away. And there we go. Now this is the interesting stuff. Here he is engaging a Yak. Now the Yak is a very good design, very maneuverable. Doesn't have a lot of fuel or a lot of long-range legs, but it makes up for that in its sheer ability to move about the sky. You can see it here. It's also got a very rugged construction, being made of mostly wood and fabric, with some metal components around the engine and the cockpit. It's very robust, very light, very maneuverable. However, the only problem is its exterior flight surfaces, ailerons, rudder, etc. are very weak, and should they suffer battle damage or critical components of the airframe are exceeded, so going too fast, too steep a dive, too high a G pulled, those flight surfaces can come off, and we'll see that shortly. So he's gotten into a kill position. He's in a 190, I believe. And you can see that bit right there. He gets hit with a 20mm from the MG-131 20mm cannon. Comes around. He goes for the shot, and he goes for the shot again. And you can see a round impact on the rudder. And in right of frame, you can see the rudder flying off. And the moment he's lost rudder control, you can see he flattens out here. He can no longer properly maneuver. And so it's only a matter of time before our German pilot here readjusts, lines up a shot, and ends this poor Russian's career, who spins out of control. This is another Yak, similar situation. Dead 6, close range, 20 mils, no problem. This is Oberleutnant Haller. I managed to get footage with the title cards of the pilots. So, Oberleutnant Haller, 4th Staffel, Jagdgeschwader 54, flying a Focke-Wulf 190A8 on the 20th of July, 1944, and he's engaging a Yak-9. Similar situation again. Now you can see one Yak-9 diving into a split-S maneuver. His wingman is trying to follow him. So, Soviet pilots, like you probably know if you've heard the rumors and myths about Cold War aviators, Soviet pilots during the Great Patriotic War, as this was known, if they were from a guards unit, they would be a lot more independent and aggressive. But if they were in a standard flight unit, they were taught to fly off their leader at all times. And so you can see the leader, who's obviously a more experienced aggressive pilot, has already made an aggressive split-S maneuver to get out of the kill zone. His wingman hasn't kept up with him, and so poor guy is being dismembered. The 190A8 has a lot of cannons on board. Like, I mean a lot. Also, for those of you who are interested, I'll also upload the raw compilation alongside this video if you just want it without my commentary. Now, this is one of his squadron mates, Lieutenant Ster, 4th Staffel, Jagdgeschwader 54 in a Focke-Wulf 190A8, 20th of July, 1944, probably the same action. These Yaks were most likely escorting their ground attack colleagues in the IL-2. Now, the IL-2 was nicknamed the Flying Tank, and certain aces from Jagdgeschwader 52, the best pilots in history, so the saying goes, Barkhorn, Hartmann, once upon a time, they engaged one of these things, and the entire squadron dumped all of their ammo into one of these things, and it kept flying. Hartmann was known to have said, "You can't bite a porcupine in the ass," which was all he had to say about the about the IL-2. Eventually, he became an expert at knocking them down. You had to shoot out the engine by hitting the oil cooler from underneath. Either that or kill the pilot. And here we have Unteroffizier Lehrmann, Staffel 4, Jagdgeschwader 54, Focke-Wulf 190A8 on the 10th of August 1944, engaging a Yak-9. But that's not a Yak-9, that's an LA-5. Well done. That's a Yak-9, though. As you can see, this one's really cool, because the Yak-9 has obviously seen his attacker, and he's turning into him. And as you can see, he's rolling out of his plane of motion. So this guy obviously knows a bit more than what he's doing. He's rolling out of his plane of motion to try and get out of the gun solution. And he's pulling tight. He can actually turn tighter than this Focke-Wulf. He just needs to maintain his Gs. He just needs to handle the Gs. Will he be able to? We'll see. He's just trying to get around on this Yak, but he can't do it, so he pulls off. So he goes in for the re-attack. Again, he's trying to maneuver. He's trying to close the distance. He's trying to create issues. He's trying to create angles. He wants to get out of the plane of motion of this 190. You can see how desperate he is, too, because we go to the next frame, just coming up here. You can see he's in trouble now. He's trying to get away with it. And here he is. Comes back again. He's pulling hard, trying to create those angles, and you can see it right here. You can see the wingtip vortices coming off. He is pulling hard G, but he's not going to get away. And that's game over. Left wing fire. Bail out. And so, yeah. That is my running commentary and breakdown and historical factoids about World War II in the air from gun camera. I will, as I said, I will put the uncommentaried version of this gun camera footage up alongside it if you want to compare, or you just want to see the footage without my ass talking over it. Alright? Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. See you next time.